All right, it's 5 p.m., so let's begin our webinar. Dear guests, welcome to the Innovative Universities webinar series, where we discuss, as usual, the cases of institutions which may change how higher education will function in the future. Our webinar will last for 1 hour. If you have any questions, please state them in the Q&A section or in the chat. We will see them regardless. Okay. Recordings will be available on YouTube. Please share your impressions using hashtag Innovative Universities. We tend to do that and then interact with each other's impressions. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, and today we will be looking at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, presented by Professor Ken Peach. So just a couple of words about our speaker. Professor Peach, Ken, is a professor emeritus at Oxford, as well as honorary professor at Edinburgh University. By his disciplinary affiliation, he is a particle physicist with a really impressive list of scholarly accomplishments. In terms of his administrative activity, he has been the founding dean of faculty affairs at Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, OIST, and he has also been the advisor on strategy to the president. Now, we are hoping that Ken will tell us about where Okinawa is exactly, as well as share his impressions about his time in the Institute and its role in Japanese higher education. Ken, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. I want to start by just making the case for excellence. As an academic, and I spent most of my career in an academic environment, we want to be excellent, or at least an authority. If you want to know about X, go and see Ken, something like that. And it doesn't really matter much what it is that we want to be excellent in. We just need to be there. But because we're driven by curiosity, this drives innovation and discovery, and this is where society in general benefits. There's also pressure to be excellent from colleagues. They like to be with people whom they consider experts. The institution clearly likes to consider that it has a lot of good people, and funders and government also are interested in making sure that they're spending their money wisely. But there are also rewards. You get a certain amount of prestige. Occasionally you're given prizes. The real reward is that you get excellent students if you're yourself excellent. And you also get a sense of satisfaction, a sense of achievement. And we want to be in an excellent environment. We want others. So although this is a very elitist approach, it's also a very collegiate one. And then the question arrives, how do you achieve excellence? And along with that, how do you measure it? Let me skip through this. I didn't actually want to go through that one. We'll come back later. So what is a recipe for excellence? First of all, if you want as an institution to be excellent, then you have to be excellent in everything, not just one or two things. And this is teaching, research, administration, technology outreach, but also things like campus design, the architecture, the facilities, the services. And since we can't, budgets are limited, it means that it's not necessary to do anything. If we do decide to go in a particular direction, we have to make sure that we have a critical mass. And this is where leadership comes in. We also need to recruit the best people. And this requires having clear criteria about the research, about the seniority, about other things. And it means applying strict standards and a healthy risk appetite, not only of the people you recruit, but also the recruiting panel. And this requires self-discipline. We need to give research freedom. this is called by Peter Gruss high trust funding. That is, you trust the people rather than funding projects, although you do need project funding as well. And the question here is, who decides your research program, you or a committee? However, with this freedom must come regular, rigorous external review. And you expect most research to be judged outstanding or excellent. And this requires honesty. And finally, you need stable funding. Outstanding takes time to deliver. You need time to fail. This needs understanding sponsors. So let's take OIST as an example. Now, what is OIST? OIST is the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University. This is a view from the campus over the East China Sea. It's beautiful. I've been there. OIST genesis, I'll just give you a short history, was in the margins of the 2000 G8 summit in Okinawa, when Kojiyomi was Minister of Science and also Minister for Okinawa, and later, importantly, Minister of Finance. And he made two observations. Okinawa is the poorest Japanese prefecture, and the Japanese universities were slipping down the international stage. So he recruited Akiko Arima, who was a former president of Tokyo University and also a former Minister of Education, and they put these together and proposed OIST, a world-leading English language research-intensive graduate university to demonstrate what's possible, and use OIST to catalyze a new high-technology, high-value-added industry in Okinawa and transform the economy. During 2001, they assembled an amazing group of people, absolutely stellar. And they devised two documents, a framework in 2003 and a blueprint in 2008. And the blueprint's aims are very clear: best in the world, flexible, international, global networking, collaboration with industry, and graduate only. And this led to the Schools Corporation Act of 2009, which created OIST. OIST actually started as a research institute in 2004. And since then, progress has been really quite rapid. OIST is, by any definition, an innovative university. But where is it? Well, you recognize the globe. This is territorial Japan. This is actually the Okinawa Prefecture, the old kingdom of the Ryukyus. This is the main island of Okinawa. And in the middle, takes you from the East China Sea to the Pacific in something like 5 or 6 kilometers. There's a hill on which you find OIST. So this is the current campus. It's a bit out of scale. All 5 lab buildings are about the same size, 15,000 square meters. Now, of course, isolation is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity.
May I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
Just for the clarity, am I right that the campus was built from scratch? There was nothing.
There was nothing. In the 1970s, there was actually a zoo there and a kind of a park. So there were a few. There was a road, not a very good road up there, and there were a few ruined buildings, but basically it was jungle.
I see. And the second question, is OIST still graduate only, or it's open to undergraduate program?
No, it's graduate only.
It's graduate only. Thank you very much.
Will remain so for some time. I don't, sometime in the future, maybe, but right now it's graduate only. There are some advantages. Marine ecology, you can see there's the reef. It's on the doorstep. And it's also a blue zone. So there are certainly research opportunities there. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but there are actually 2 things called OIST: the Schools Corporation, which is what the Schools Corporation Act created, and the Graduate University, which is what the Schools Corporation created. And they're connected by the fact that the president of the university is the CEO of the Board of Governors of the Schools Corporation, although it has a separate chair for governance reasons. It has a president's office, which you might expect. I'll say a little bit more about the structure of the academic sector in a moment. and it has an administrative sector which has most of what you expect. But because of the isolation and the need to interface the international aspects of OIST with the local, there's a rather large welfare section. And in order to deliver the mission on transforming the Okinawan economy, there's actually the OIST innovation, which is again important. So the current status, the academic sector has some unusual features. First of all, there are no departments. Below the provost and the deans, there are the faculty, there are the research units and a couple of other things which are important, but there's no other structure. There's one graduate school, and the students belong to the graduate school throughout their postgraduate career, and they work in the research units, but they're managed by the graduate school. And finally, most of the equipment and all of the big equipment is in common facilities, things like the animal facilities, imaging, sequencing, high-performance computing, the marine station. And this means that so, you know, if a physicist decides that they need DNA sequencing, it's there. Current status, there are about 90 faculty, there are about 500 or 600 researchers. We have about, they have about 280, 290 students. Internationality is built into this. In the 2009 Act, more than half of the faculty and more than half of the students should be non-Japanese. I won't say anything at all about this, but just to show that the spin out of technology is taken seriously. And although we were not surprised, we were very pleased in 2019 when Nature Index produced a ranking which showed that Okinawa OIST was 9th in the world and top in Japan. This is our colleagues in Institute for Science and Technology in Austria. This is a validation, I think, of the approach. Now, while OIST does not have research areas, it does have research themes which self-assemble and have no other function but to devise strategy. And it has 3 levels of assistant, associate, and full professors, but each of these had their own research unit. So assistant and associate professors do not assist and aren't associated with anybody else. Not only does OIST not have departments, it also doesn't have dedicated buildings. Each building is basically an incoherent mix of disciplines. The aim is to lower the barriers to collaboration, create a true collegiality, and supported by common equipment. The graduate training program is also interesting. It has a 5-year PhD in science. In the first year, they do coursework and 3 rotations, and this is very important. They go into 3 different labs, one of which has to be out of field. So if they want to do a physics PhD, they have to spend one term in a biology lab and vice versa. In the second year, they write a thesis proposal, which is externally examined, and then they do their research. So what about our recipe for excellence?
Sorry,
yeah.
Sorry, just for the clarity.
Yeah.
Again. So the graduate school is essentially doctoral school.
Yes.
OIST doesn't award master degrees.
It does, but at the moment there's no formal master's program.
I see.
So that if a student struggles, then there is an exit route, which means that they haven't wasted their time completely. So there is a master's possibility, and there may at some point be formal master's degrees, but the emphasis is on the PhD. OIST wants to create the leaders of tomorrow.
Super. It's very interesting and unusual. So it's a long PhD track, 5 years. So may I ask also the clarification question, why this idea that physics student, doctoral student should spend a term in, and how many months, by the way, in biology lab? Isn't it a waste of time?
Very much the opposite. It's absolutely critically important if you want to build people, if you want to train people who are capable of taking leadership roles, they have to understand more than the narrow thing which they study. And a lot of, the easy stuff's been done. A lot of exciting research comes on the boundary between different disciplines, and this is the whole object of having no departments. Once you start having departments, you build walls. The human animal is a very territorial thing, and even if there are no walls there, they will build them in their mind. And so you have to work very hard to break down barriers. But in breaking down barriers, you can be genuinely innovative. And that's what's behind this idea of the rotation, to see that there is something else and to produce. So, it is not a waste of their time. And sometimes students find that although they wanted to come in and do physics or chemistry or biology or whatever it is they wanted to do, they maybe find that something else is even more interesting. And this gives them the flexibility to decide for themselves what it is they actually want to do. And that's also the point of making them write a thesis proposal rather than doing something which they've been told is available. Okay?
Yes, I got the idea. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So the founders, you saw it in the blueprint. They want to be best in the world. That's what drives it. We've produced a strategic plan where we updated this a little bit. So we want to be recognized, or OIST wants to be recognized as world leading. It wants to be the destination of choice. We want people to say, if I'm good enough, I would like to go to OIST. And we want to be the partner of choice. Can I, if I need some help, can OIST deliver that? Recruitment is usually done by departments, both of faculty and graduate students. But this is, for me, a problem, and it's a real advantage, which I don't think was thought through at the beginning. If you have no departments, then you have to recruit at university level. And this has several advantages. If you've got a large department, maybe 30 faculty, you get one position a year, and that doesn't allow you to think very strategically. But if you go to university level, you have several, and then you can have some flexibility about the discipline, about the seniority, about diversity, about many things. And it also means that all the students follow the same staff. So you have paths, so you have common standards and processes. We may want to discuss this a little bit later, but in reality, there are two questions for a recruitment panel. Is the candidate appointable? Do they satisfy the criteria? And of the appointable candidates, which is best? And this is where the problem lies, because best is not a well-defined quantity. And in most cases, at some point, only the first question can be answered. And that's where biases can come in. At OIST, this happens when the file goes from the president to the board of governors. And then along the side this, you need rigorous tenure and promotion procedures with the same criteria and standards as for appointment. High trust funding. Each research unit has a 5-year funding profile. They're free to pursue their own research and allow risk-taking and innovation. But they're also encouraged to apply for individual grants, and OIST supports a broader external research program. So this sounds like paradise, and in some senses it is. But of course, there's a price. And that is that every 5 years, they're also subjected to rigorous, and I mean rigorous, external review. 5 experts in the field have extensive documentation, plus a site visit. Site visit is absolutely critical in my view, so that they can meet the students and the postdocs, see the facilities. And they're required to rate the work as outstanding, excellent, good, satisfactory, or poor, and at least excellent is expected. Good is not good. And the next 5-year funding depends on the outcome. OIST also has a lot of other external peer review of the whole organization about every 5 years, ad hoc reviews of research support, IP proposals, new research directions. And of course, like others, it's officially reviewed by the ministry or equivalent. These are nominally independent, but I have some concerns, particularly if the Secretariat is involved in drafting the report. Stable funding is almost as important as the level of funding. It allows time to develop the intellectual ideas. It allows risk-taking and sometimes failing, remembering that the easy stuff has almost certainly already been done. There's a nice quote from Humphrey Davy: "The most important of my discoveries have been suggested to me by my failures." Failure is not a failure. Failure is a learning opportunity. The challenge is to find funding that understands the importance of freedom. And one of my favorite questions is it better to achieve an easy goal, which is if you want funding, something you better propose, or just fail an ambitious one? And this is where the freedom comes and the high trust funding. So at OIST, most of the budget comes through the government, through the Okinawa promotion budget. And this is an annual allocation with no guarantees about future years. This is just the Japanese system, so it's the way it is. But in practice, this year is a lot like last year. The ideal would be something like 3 to 5 year rolling budget, fixed for the current year, estimates for the next following year or two with a high probability of release, and so on. This is ideal, but very rare. So summary and conclusions.
May I again intervene with clarification? So if there is this once in 5 year rigorous peer review and evaluation, how it can coexist with tenure? That's the first question. And the second question, isn't it very, you mentioned that there are a lot of peer review or external review activities. It's quite expensive. It's very time consuming. Does it become a kind of control climate, in fact? Okay, 2 questions on tenure. There is clearly an impact, and so far we OIST hasn't had to deal with a situation where a tenured professor fails an external review. But processes are required to deal with that. For the untenured professors, they get a tenure review after 5 years, and it involves a peer review. The external peer review is, as you say, expensive, but this is the price that you have to pay for freedom. How else are you going to judge research? I don't know any other way of judging the output of research other than by having a conversation with the people who produce the work. I do not believe in the algorithmic approach. The algorithms can be gamed. So if you want to give people and you want to motivate them, as academics, we love to talk about our research. Although it's the 5 year reviews are highly stressful for the academic staff, for the PIs, for the faculty and the researchers, they're nevertheless something which you can recognize as being welcome and necessary. So yes, it's relatively expensive compared with just sending an envelope to a bunch of people and asking what they think. But the quality of the information that you get from that is much, 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 much better because it involves dialogue. And you can also say it's very important that you talk to the postdocs and to the graduate students. Thank you.
Okay, so summary and conclusions, right? In my view, the pursuit of excellence is noble. It is elitist, there's no doubt about that, but it's also, if you do it correctly, it's collegiate. as Isaac hinted, it's actually a challenge for science managers. You have accountability versus effectiveness, but you also have control versus freedom. And walking that tightrope requires a certain amount of skill. This, again, comes to leadership. The key drivers, first of all, I repeat, you need to be excellent in everything that you do. And this means taking hard decisions if you can't do everything, and therefore you need to be selective. And if you find something which is weak, then you have two choices. You can make it stronger, or you can shut it down. But leaving it there as a weak activity won't work. You need to recruit the best. We can discuss how you made that. Freedom. The best person to define my research is me, and I insist on that. Other people can offer advice, but however, with freedom comes rigorous review, and you need adequate and stable funding. And I'll leave you with one quotation from Vince Lombardi, who was a football coach that knew something about human nature. Perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, maybe we can catch excellence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ken, we agreed with Dara that I will be mainly responsible for the next stage of the webinar for the interview, but Dara, please enter when you wish. We have already two questions from our online participants, and one is quite simple and in fact provocative, I would say. The question, why do you call it university? You are from Oxford, and I'm also now from campus-based university, where I see a lot of undergrads doing strange things. And here we have this research institute. Why do you call it university, a university? Is it formality, or you as a scholar thinks that it's something really of the university?
Very good question. First of all, if you want to train graduate students, right, then a function of a university is training at the graduate student level. And the ability to award degrees is reserved usually to universities. So a pure research institute would require collaboration, at least with other universities, to be the degree awarding part. Yeah, I was at the Rutherford Lab for 8 years, and Rutherford Lab is a lab. It's a research institute, so can't award degrees. So then you have to do all sorts of stuff, like doing deals with friendly universities that they will lend you their graduate students for 3 or 4 years, because you want people with young people, you want bright people with good ideas. This is where the next generation of leaders is going to come from. So for that, you need to be a university and not just a research institute. There are also other things which universities do. I like to describe it, there's research that enables the teaching to be excellent, but then there's also scholarship. This is curating the information for the future. So OIST is a graduate university. Its focus is doing fundamental research at the highest level and producing graduate students, PhDs, at the highest level. And we expect those to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Thank you. It's very clear. And in fact, we are not surprised to see, for example, universities for lifelong learning. Why should we be surprised to see university for future research generation. So I guess it's again, as all our webinar series shows, the landscape of higher education is very diverse, and so today we discuss another type of another kind of university. Ken, we have two questions related to finance. One is very simple and direct. You can avoid it if you like. You mentioned that in your opinion, it's adequate level of finance. So our participants asks, what is adequate level? And the second question is, you said that the most of the money comes from the government. So does it is it a sign that the companies, private companies, industry is not interested in OIST research and they do not want to support it?
Let me take those. So OIST, if you go back and look at it, at the history, the kind of model that people have is Caltech. If you want to be with something a little bit more familiar. So it's written not quite explicitly, but you know, it says that the ideal size for OIST, according to its founders, would be about 300 faculty, which is the size of Caltech. And somewhere in one of the in the blueprint, you can ask how much you need in order for a research group to, you know, you can just look at the amount that a research group requires, and it's sort of $2 million a year-ish. Gives you enough. You know, I gave you the typical size of a group, which is, you know, a PI, 468 postdocs, 3 graduate students, an administrator, and then maybe 1 or 2 more. So that's the kind of level of funding that you need to be adequate, in my opinion. Yes, at the moment, most of the money comes from the government. There is quite a lot of engagement with industry, but industry doesn't fund it. It's currently a publicly funded private university in Japanese terms. Where it will end up, I don't know. Is the honest answer. It's bound up with how it's to contribute to the sustainable development of Okinawa. I didn't quote it, but you know, what's laid down in the act is that it should conduct world-leading research and graduate student education and contribute to the self-sustainable development of Okinawa. And how this is to be maintained in the long run, I think, is one of the challenges of the future.
Thank you very much. And but again, the question was more about the interest of the industrial companies. If OIST is so successful that it's ninth in the world in terms of the research production, and you are working, OIST is working in very hard science field, why there is no line of industrial companies that want to finance OIST research?
That's for me a difficult question to answer. one of the problems is Okinawa is itself quite remote. It's a 3-hour flight from Tokyo. It's much nearer Taiwan than it is to Tokyo. And it is underdeveloped as an industrial economy. And if I was a major industry, for example, there's no car plant, as far as I know, in Okinawa. Now, Japan has a very strong car construction industry, but it wouldn't make any sense to build a factory in Japan because you have to ship the stuff out. There is a lot of engagement with industry from time to time, and they do fund some research, but it's not a major sponsor of OIST as an institution. Not yet. Now, OIST also, in the OIST innovation, it has one incubator building, and it's building a second and already planning a third, where there are a number of innovative companies being created. And we have to see how those develop in good time.
Okay, it indeed raises some questions about the sustainable future, because you know that around the time that OIST was created, there were a number of similar attempts, including Masdar University in Abu Dhabi. And Masdar University was an innovative idea to create university around sustainability, environment, etc. And finally, Abu Dhabi government decided to merge it with University of Abu Dhabi, because Masdar University didn't bring any industrial money or other sources, or money from other sources. Okay, but let's leave it. We have a clarification question from one of our participants about this out of field period. Do the doctoral students have freedom in choosing this out of field lab, or they are kind of directed where to go?
I mean, this was not my area of responsibility, but the approach that OIST has is to give the students as much freedom as they can. So they are certainly involved in the decision about which labs they might go into.
Okay, so let's come to another question, which probably requires longer and broader answer. What is the role of OIST in Japan higher education? How do you see this? Because you almost, we got some understanding of the possible role of OIST in Okinawa economic development. But in terms of higher education in Japan, there is a perception that Japanese higher education is not very international. It's quite closed. It's very hierarchical. And here we are, 50% from abroad. All model is very different. Is the OIST still kind of complete alien for Japanese higher education, or you build connections with Japanese universities, and how it works and what they learned from OIST?
Okay, first of all, OIST does have quite strong connections with things like Tohoku University and Keio and a few others, and also with Riken. So it is part of the Japanese higher education system, but it is rather different in the sense that its sponsoring department is the Cabinet Office, not the Ministry of Science and Education. However, as a university, it is, of course, governed by the rules of MEX, so it needs accreditation. So unlike the national universities, which are totally under the control of MEX, OIST has 2 masters, which it must satisfy. Academically, as far as being a university is concerned, it must meet the criteria and the standards of MEX, but it also must meet the expectations of the Cabinet Office, which is the actual sponsoring department. I have to be a little bit careful how I say this, so let me think. The traditional Japanese universities are, as you say, quite hierarchical. Akito Arima, who was very important in defining what OIST, tried to reform the University of Tokyo by opening it up to things like external review and so on. And it was, I think, difficult is probably the correct phrase to use. So one of the ideas of OIST is to demonstrate that it can be done. Now, I spent nearly all my adult life and all of my professional life living in a multicultural, multinational, multilingual environment. For the first 40 years, this was based at CERN, where the background language is French and the basic culture is French. It is European. So it's not so much of a readjustment. But I also have spent 4 years living in Japan, living in Okinawa, which is again an international environment, but the background language and the background culture is Japanese. And that's a somewhat greater readjustment. And one of the advantages that I think OIST has is that it demonstrates that there is a way of attracting international, not only international faculty, researchers and graduate students, but also international administrators to Japan to work in that environment and to find it challenging and rewarding. And I think, in the dozen years that OIST has existed, it has certainly put in place all of the things that are required in order to make that a possibility. So I think OIST is a demonstrator to the international community that it is possible to live and work in Japan in a very, there are many advantages to this society, but it's also an illustration to the other Japanese universities that it is possible to attract international faculty, international researchers, international students. And I know if I go back to my Oxford and Edinburgh days, the opening up of the university sector in the 1980s from a largely homogeneous national institution to today's universities, which are very international. If you go to any department, any physics department in any university in the UK, you will see people from half a dozen countries. And this is, I think, very stimulating and very, very rewarding. And I think it would, it's the gene pool kind of argument, that the more people with different experiences come together, the more likely it is that you are going to invent and discover something completely new. And it's this mix. It's it's a little bit Darwinian, but it also works, in my opinion.
Let me push a bit the question of innovations. Yeah, I have got the idea what OIST brought to Japanese higher education system. You are working in the best university in the world, according to some rankings, or at least one of the best universities in the world. Still, what would you advise to the Vice Chancellor of Oxford to change based on OIST experience of your or other colleagues in OIST experience?
Oxford's had 900 years to get it right. I think it would be a little bit presumptuous for a university that's been around for a little more than a decade to start offering too much advice about how they might get things right. The features that I have kind of outlined, however, are built into the way in which Oxford works. So, excellence in everything that Oxford does is what they aim for. The departments are in general large. For example, the physics department in Oxford, which I'm relatively familiar with, is, in terms of the number of faculty, larger than OIST. That's a very big physics department. It has 5 sub-departments. So Oxford is able, for many reasons, and many other universities, to have a critical mass in almost anything that they wish to study. The problem I have spent quite a lot of time trying to study this. There was a study from the Institute of Physics about 20 years ago, which showed that a physics department with fewer than about 20 faculty would find it very difficult to be internationally competitive. And I've studied, for example, the output of the 2014 ref, and there's a very clear correlation between some ranking of the quality of the departments versus size. So, once you get above about 20 or so people in a particular field, the ranking goes up rather slowly as you increase that number to several hundred. But below that number of 20, 25, 30, somewhere about, the rankings just fall more or less like a stone. So the message, and this is where excellence in everything that you do is so important, that you need to think very carefully. There's no point in having one huge group which is world leading and everything else weak. That will not get you to the top of the tree. Now, this poses problems for small universities, I agree. And there you have to choose between being able to cover a wide range of topics at the undergraduate level with being excellent at the research level. If you only have 10 faculty, you can do maybe 2 things. But that's not enough to put on a fully broad program. And this is one of the other reasons why, for example, OIST is a graduate university, because then you can focus down. If you're teaching undergraduates, there's a certain corpus of knowledge that they have to acquire, and that requires people who are qualified to teach them. And that spreads your resources really rather thin if you're a relatively small organization. Now, your OIST will never be a very big university like Oxford. It will always be a relatively small institution. And that's another reason why you want to go down the graduate route. And it's also, by the way, why OIST can't really offer that much advice to a place like Oxford, because they are big in research, but they're also big in undergraduate education, and that's a different field altogether.
That's very interesting, and probably it would be my last question. I know that Dara has a couple. Sorry, Dara. In fact, I got your point, and it could be, I know that many countries now are struggling to get strong research university. And what you said essentially is don't try to kill two animals at once. Focus on build graduate school if you want quick wins in building research university, because it would be even in a sense cheaper than to build big university with a huge undergraduate. That's very important takeout, at least for me, from our discussion, because we observe, and during our webinar series, we'll see a lot of attempts in different countries to build such things. And sometimes when the country put enough money, like at Hong Kong University Institute or University of Science and Technology, it could be both tasks could be solved. But in most cases, these projects are not successful because there are just simply not enough money to solve both tasks. Thank you very much for that. And very last question, factual. These doctoral students that OIST trained, do you know what share of them stay in Japan? Not at OIST, but go to other Japanese universities, benefit them?
I can't remember. I mean, there are statistics on that, and it's of order 15, 20%, I think. I'd have to look it up. But yes, quite a number do stay in Japan. Some of them, of course, are Japanese, but there are, I mean, it's a very interesting and pleasant place to live. I mean, I lived there, for 4 years, and enjoyed 5 years nearly, and enjoyed every moment of it. But yes, there are, and of course, there's always other reasons why people might wish to stay in Japan.
Thank you, Dara. Please, I know that you have questions. Yeah.
I do have a lot of questions, but I'm pretty sure I will not be able to ask even 10% of them. So one question that I keep thinking about, you mentioned a couple of times that OIST is preparing leaders. Now, usually when universities say that they are preparing leaders, they're either connected to entrepreneurship, like African Leadership University. Some business schools are claiming they're preparing leaders, especially in the executive programs. Schools of governance are saying they're preparing leaders. But you're linking leadership, societal leadership, if I understand you correctly, with research specifically, which gives me a bit of this philosopher king kind of aftertaste. So could you comment why such strong connection?
Okay, thanks, Dara. I should perhaps correct what I said. I really meant science leaders.
Oh, okay.
Science leaders of tomorrow. I'm associated with other things to do with creating leaders. But really what we're interested in and you know, the true test of whether OIST has succeeded in that is going to come in future, you know, 5, 10 years, 50 years time. Are OIST graduates now running major university departments, major research activities? You know, we were very pleased, for example, that one of our very first graduates, first job was as an assistant professor in Harvard. You know, this is what we think we're trying to do, which is to create people. And this is also important about the rotations, that if you want to exercise science leadership, then you need to be aware of other sciences. You know, the completely blinkered person, they're going to do a great deal, but they're never, in my view, going to be sufficiently open, broad-minded to be able to exercise leadership at an institutional level, for example. That's why I said at the beginning, you know, this focus on an excellence, you know, is an elitist approach. This is actually one of the problems with Japan, is elitism is not really a valued quality. You know, it's a much more socially motivated. And that's one of the, you know, one of the pleasures of living there, of course. But if you want to lead a major institution, then you need a certain humility, right? That you know, my research is important to me, but your research is important to the institution. And this is something which, you know, by not having departments, for example, by having these multi-disciplinary buildings, you know, you're building a mentality which says, you know, basically we're all in this together. We all float or we all sink. And it's that sort of leadership which I think we would like our students to experience, you know, to see that we can all work together. And together we are stronger than we are individually. And this also comes, as I said, you know, the easy stuff's been done. You know, where's the fun in doing easy stuff? You need to set yourself hard targets. And some hard targets are when you see, you know, I've learned something and I think I can help them solve their problems. Or maybe you look in the next lab and you realize, you know, they've worked out some neat little mathematical trick, or they've got some fancy little gadget, which may be just the thing which might help my research. You know, and that way you can seriously make progress.
Ken, thank you very much. We are approaching the end of our webinar. We have only 2 minutes left according to my clock. So for our audience, Ken, if you allow me, I'll just quickly summarize what you said in there. So Ken mentioned setting hard targets, then going outside your field of expertise or your disciplinary silo, whichever you are doing. And finally, if you want to lead something, you've got to have humility. So this might be something that our audience can take home from this webinar as a final point. Again, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you for being here today. May we have this slide about the next webinar. So we will stay in the area, sort of. We'll travel from Okinawa to Singapore, and we will explore the Yale NUC, which is National University of Singapore College. Yale NUC is a liberal arts college, so this is a bit of a bridge to our October 19th discussion, and we are very much hoping to see you there. In the meantime, we'll share our impressions of this webinar, tagging Ken in LinkedIn and using the hashtag Innovative Universities, as we tend to do. If you have some remaining impressions, questions to Ken, any ideas about the webinar, also please share them online in any social net that you like, preferably LinkedIn, because we happen to kind of communicate there a bit more. And just a final technical comment: after this webinar, you'll get a little survey asking you about what you think about the format, about the webinar, how satisfied you are. And you can be sure that we'll be reading all of the impressions, and we'll try to accommodate your preferences as to the best of our ability. So have a nice evening, or whichever time of the day you've got there, and goodbye.